Maintenant 3 ateliers parallèles, Céline. Donc, for the session Heroes and Emotions, I am very happy to be here to moderate the session. So I hope the speakers are there.
Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to our presentation on For Forest, an eco art project. My name is Francisca, and I will guide you through a few thoughts and a few ideas about our study and a pretty beautiful environmental art project that I think will stir up a lot of discussions. I'm very happy to share my screen and talk a bit about this project. So here we go. This is my wonderful colleague Denise that I want to introduce at the beginning. Denise Voci is a senior scientist at the University of Klagenfurt. She is interested in organizational communication from very different perspectives, but with her work tries to better understand the role of media and media management in the public sphere, and has this very special interest in corporate social responsibility and framing and rhetorics. And this is probably not the only thing where the two of us align. Denise is located at the University in Klagenfurt, which is in the south of Austria, pretty close to the Italian and Slovenian border. And as you can see, it's kind of water-rich, pretty green, or even traditionally green. And so this is probably like, a major aspect where the two of us complement each other pretty nicely, because this is where I started last year, and a long journey and a big move to Australia, where I am now teaching and researching at the University of Queensland in Brisbane. And so now I'm definitely in a much more dry and hot and pretty warm, as I said at the beginning, environment. And but this is, as I said, not the only complement that Denise and I have. I'm as well pretty interested in organizational communication, so all the communication that is happening within organizations, but that embeds organization in the wider public sphere. And Denise and I share this interest in sustainability communication, in kind of framing and narratives of sustainability and storytelling approaches. So our big question is how to communicate about and for sustainability. And this pretty broad question is something that keeps us busy, firstly on an individual level, which means that we ask ourselves how to overcome all these cognitive dissonances that are coming along with sustainability. So all these tiny little questions that we ask ourselves every day, like, am I really vegan if I don't post my avocado sandwich on Facebook or Instagram? Or like, does it really make things better if I take my bike to go to uni compared to taking the car? Or what is happening with us being on a virtual conference now and not having all these CO2 emissions because we don't have to fly somewhere and we don't have to travel. But this is not part of this project that we are presenting today. Today we're talking about the big question of how to communicate about and for sustainability from an organizational perspective. And as I said before, we are really interested in organizations telling the sustainability story. And no question, we have to talk about corporates, because corporates do engage socially and environmentally for years now. They create a lot of this sustainability story. They work with sustainability as a frame that kind of replaces innovation or replaces future orientation. So there's a lot of things that we are interested in, and that like research is really relevant and very important. However, like from a broader organizational perspective, it's not only about the corporates. It's about political institutions as well. And it is about non-profit organizations, non-governmental organizations, and all the other organizations that are out there and who talk about the environment, who talk about climate change, who talk about sustainability. And we do embrace all organizations here, starting with like tree huggers, going to Greenpeace, from community gardens to kind of scientists for climate change or parents for climate change, until we come to environmental art. Environmental art or eco art, this is what is in our focus today, and this is where we did this beautiful research project on that we want to present today. So environmental art is something that is not as often looked at from an organizational communication perspective. So there are artists, there are philosophers, there are social scientists from different disciplines, other researchers with an heuristic interest that try to better understand eco art, environmental art, and the potential of eco and environmental art in creating narratives and creating a better understanding of the environment and sustainability. However, I think this is our complement, and here again about talking about complements. Here, I think Denise and I bring in a certain knowledge of like how organizations work and how they communicate, and how this communication really stimulates and manages issues in the wider public. So that communication is this very, very important process that links an organization of whatever kind to the wider public sphere. And we wouldn't be good researchers if we wouldn't theorize a bit. So what we present as a kind of theoretical incentive at the beginning is that we actually start thinking, okay, when we talk about eco art, when we talk about environmental art from an organizational communication perspective, what is it? Is it like an NGO? Is it a kind of non-profit organization? What do we talk about? Can we somehow bring up a typology that covers and includes eco or environmental art, that includes those different forms of communication that are coming along? So we know that is quite a big and intense table, but what I really want to point out here is if you look at this kind of three types, A, B, and C, the interesting and most important takeaway for you is that we try to make a difference between all those NGOs and non-profit organizations that talk about, or who talk about sustainability as an alternative within the existing market economy, within the existing system. So all the organizations operating within the existing power structures and order of capitalism. So here we have those kind of rather like those organizations where communication works rather kind of top down. So universities and research institutions, political institutions, and like new forms of sustainable investment, for example. And including all those global reporting initiatives and all these SDG UN work that is done. From a rather bottom-up perspective, we can talk about watchdog groups, Greenpeace, all these kind of consumer activism and fair trade organizations and movements that still kind of try to cope with how our system works. So they work within the order of capitalism and try to offer different solutions and alternatives, as I said before, within the system. However, then we have new forms of movements, communication, participation, and engagement happening that don't fit in these categories, because what they do is bringing up system critique, being rather anti-profit and engaging via problematization, something that we call like bringing in reflexivity, bringing in proactively a problem, making an issue out of something. So here we talk about Extinction Rebels, Friday for Future movement, or the Sunrise movement. And here is where we see eco art, where we see all these forms of art that relates to the environment or sustainability as a normative framework. So this is where we try to overcome those kind of corporate non-profit duality with really looking more intense into the non-profit communication and those variations, and trying really to kind of theorize why this aspect of problematization is so important and inherent when we talk about eco-art. And this fits nicely to what we know about eco and environmental art. We know about eco and environmental art that it is about all those creative efforts that address specifically environmental issues and climate change related topics. So there's a lot about plastic and straws and all these bottles and bottled water, but there's a lot about ocean waste and all these topics. And they're beautiful examples of these creative ways to stimulate public discourses, to stimulate collective action, by communicating a certain issue more strategically and therefore more effectively. And what we do see in these projects is, as we theorized before, we see this problematization. We see what we say, oh, they make an issue out of something. So it's not only talking about a certain topic. It's not only bringing up facts about a certain topic like those other types of NGOs do. But with eco and environmental art, it's much stronger, a much stronger problem focus, a much stronger focus on, hey, this is a topic, but we make an issue out of it. We put it out there, we put it on the stage, and we really need to talk about it. So this kind of theoretical background was important for us to understand something that was happening at kind of our doorstep, because as I said at the beginning, I was in Austria. I was working with Denise in Klagenfurt, this beautiful green and traditionally green city in the south of Austria. And there happened something very, very interesting. In 2019, there was someone called Klaus Littmann who picked up a drawing, this drawing from Max Peintner from the 70s, and tried to realize it, tried to bring it to life. So what you can see here in this black and white pencil drawing is this beautiful example of the human nature relationship being really distant, being something that where we as humans look at the nature like compared to animals that we look at in the zoo. You can see this urban setting in the background, and then the kind of critique that comes along with it related to the human and very artificial human nature relationship. And as I said, in the very traditionally green Austria, Klaus Littmann did what Max Peintner suggested in his painting. He actually built this forest in the stadium. This project was called For Forest, and it was labeled as an environmental art project. And so basically what was done is that the local football stadium in Klagenfurt, a city of 100,000, was turned into this large art installation. Basically around 300 trees were transplanted and from areas where they've been grown to this stadium and planted on the existing pitch to give the impression of a Central European forest, like these mixed forests, and it could be visited for free for about a month. Surprisingly, this project was highly recognized internationally. Okay, that probably wasn't that surprising. However, it was mainly negatively debated on a local and regional level. So there were a lot of conflicts. And this is why Denise and I said, whoa, that's really interesting. Like from an outside perspective, that's like this beautiful eco art project. And this is the biggest art project Austria has ever seen in the world. And how beautiful is that? And what a cool idea. But then on a very local level, people were highly debating it. And that was such a negative label put on it. And so we thought, well, as communication scholars, we do have the duty to really look at this more carefully and understand why. Why is it so debated? Why is it so conflictual? Why are there so many antagonisms in the public discourse? So was this sustainability communication? And if so, was it sustainability communication as its best or as its worst? So what we did is we collected all the social media content and the local and regional, national and international media content, so print media content, before, during, and after the project from August to November 2019. So the project was mainly happening in September. And so we started in August and went till the end of November and collected all these newspaper articles and kind of followed the Facebook page in terms of really including all the comments and creating this beautiful text corpus that we then worked with qualitative content analysis with QCA map, and I would say a bit more about this later in the findings. This content analysis was something we had to complement by interviews. We really wanted to talk to the artist himself, which we did with the PR agency and the PR people communicating around this project and for the project. But we talked to people like from the very close neighborhood, from people who lived there, and the sport manager of the stadium and some coaches. And we talked to journalists as well. So we tried to create this heterogeneous sample of kind of stakeholders, or people that we call stakeholders in this scenario around this project. So yeah, well, just a few words about the media analysis. So what you do with QCA map and this kind of innovative form of qualitative content analysis is that it goes a bit beyond these top kind of thematic or topic analysis that we're used to, because you basically take the text corpus in here and you follow those 2 steps of categorization, which helps you to kind of take various forms of media content into account, even visuals. And this media content, Facebook posts, those comments, and the interviews as well. And you can treat everything as one text corpus. And from there, you try to break it down to the main narratives. And from there, you try to co-create these discourses that you identify. So what are the main discourses that are where this project is talked about? And we were able to identify certain discourses, like an economic discourse, very locality related discourse, some narratives about the climate crisis and this human nature relationship and sustainability were possible to be identified, as well as some, like a lot of stuff on kind of political misbehavior and financial issues. So this kind of qualitative, however, pretty structured process led us to the point that we were able to better understand why things happened like this. Why were people so critical on a local level, leading this massive big argument? Hey, actually, there is a forest out there and there is all the nature where we go to like every Sunday afternoon. Why do we need the forest in the stadium? Why is it? What is the message behind? What is happening there? So sorry, that's not part of the methodology. It's actually part of the findings. But what I want to say is that, and show you, is that we, like, from this text corpus and with our qualitative analysis and these categorizations, we were able to really find these beautiful discourses that were pretty much not really about sustainability, not really about the environment. There was this massive sub-discourse on sport and why football is much more important than art, especially for the locality or the local area and the region. And this kind of main discourse was kind kind of fired up by a discourse that has a bit of a history, because the stadium in Klagenfurt was built. The size of the stadium and all the money that was used to build the stadium was a very interesting political issue years ago, because it's probably much too large for the region and for what it is used for. So there are a lot of discourses, like historic discourses, that fed in this new discourse why football and sport is even more important in this region. And so that was one kind of strain that we were able to identify. Then the second strain of discussion, or the second discourse or sub-discourse related to forest, was around these trees and where they came from and how they get transported to the stadium, and all the machines and all the transportation issues, and how much CO2 emissions there were actually happening just to make this real, so that it was basically much more like reinforcing climate change than actually working against it. And this big thing that I just mentioned before, that it just doesn't fit to the location at all, because it's green anyway. And this is just to kind of confirm what I'm saying and what this massive discussion was about, because in the painting of Max Peintner, again, you can see these like skyscrapers in the background and this beautiful, like very municipal and urban setting. But this down here, this is Klagenfurt, and you can see it's a very tiny city in a very, very green environment. And here's the stadium, and in the stadium was the forest planted. So the disruption, this kind of gap between the reality and the nature, or this kind of urban space and our distant kind of relationship to nature. The big question was if this really worked well in this traditionally green scenario. The last strain of discussion was about like the finance and how this whole kind of project was, who paid for that, and why art needs so much money, especially from taxpayers. And there was a lot about kind of a political discussion about transparency and how no one really knew about like where this money came from and who paid what. So these kind of three major discourses, as you can see, were not really about sustainability. And this is what we would like to put out for discussion now at the end, is that over the time, like there's a tiny bit of a timeline down here in this graph, over the time, and due to the fact that this was so highly conflictual, and there was such a massive discussion going on, and so much kind of conflict, especially on a local and regional level, that the communication around for forest, the strategic communication, all the PR efforts kind of changed over the time. And suddenly, at the end of September, not only there were elections in Austria, but there was this big awareness about the fires in the Amazon. So we cannot really trace back where it came from. The only thing that we can see is that suddenly all the conversations kind of changed, and the sustainability narrative was brought in strategically. The big narrative of that this is an art project that stands for our fight against climate change, that stands for the need for a regeneration of the human-nature relationship. This narrative was brought in. And we can take away that sustainability was brought in as a kind of pacification narrative, a narrative that kind of pacified all the conflict, all the questions, everything that was put in request from a financial and economic perspective, from a political perspective, that the sustainability narrative came in kind of like, oh, look at this beautiful project, look at those fires in the Amazon, and wow, here we are now, this beautiful project, this lighthouse project for our fight against climate change and the global warming. So sustainability was brought in as something that was really kind of getting away, or where there was this big attempt to get away from these tiny bits of financial things, political questions, transparency issues, and their whole kind of conflict and antagonism, to get back to something very consensual, to come back to something like that is common sense, that we need this change, we need the regeneration, we need a new kind of way to treat our resources in a better way. So the big learning and the big takeaway for us is, and this is what we really would love to further discuss with you and take your feedback on, that we are not quite sure if this project really missed a few opportunities. And this is why we labeled this presentation as kind of missed chances of an eco art project, in terms of bringing in the sustainability narrative too late, bringing in the sustainability narrative only to kind of pacify those conflicts and to get away from these tiny little issues on a local level. So that the project itself didn't turn sustainability itself and how we treat our resources into a field of contestation, a field of conversational contestation. So there was no chance to really talk about sustainability, about meanings, about various forms, and about sustainability as an alternative to the existing frameworks. It was a bit too late from our perspective that it was brought up, and so it gets a bit like, it was more kind of a bit shallow and a bit of a hollow nation that was put on the project. But as said before, we're very, very happy to kind of take any kind of questions, to get in touch with you, to chat further, compare it with other projects, with your experiences and everything, where you kind of stumbled over in terms of like, whoa, why are they saying this? That was irritating. Perfect, let us know, and we're more than happy to kind of talk about this with you, and send you the paper as soon as it's published. It's already accepted in the International Journal of Communication, so you can read about this more if you're interested, and just let us know. And as said, we're more than happy to take your questions. Thanks a lot from our side.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for the presentation and the work. I had just a question on the paper she was talking about, and the paper that is cited, that is quoted in the paper. Is it a book or a journal paper that you are?
No, it's a journal paper already accepted in the International Journal of Communication. I think it will be published early next year. Yeah.
Next year, okay. On this, the analysis of this interesting case. So I don't know if there are questions or comments on this case from the public, from people who are there. Don't hesitate. Personally, I don't have a specific question. Just that, the distinction between the three types of communication was very interesting, and of course, I suppose that the case study in the case of the Forest Project is in the third one. So this is clear, and. Yes, you already presented in the document, so it's not necessary to come back to this typology, but it's clearly very interesting to.
It should, or we have expected that the Forest Project, or it could have the possibility to be the type C, where you stimulate some kind of behavioral change or change in mind, but it was a missed chance already, because the sustainability issue or the sustainability discourse was brought in far too late, after that all these conflicting discourses were set on the local level.
I don't know if because I wasn't able to understand everything during the presentation, but I don't know if she already presented the authors, so the group that made the project.
Yeah, the original painting was from Max Painter from the 70s, and then Klaus Littmann with Enzo Enea realized it here in Klagenfurt.
So they are. So it was just a group of people who did the job.
Klaus Littmann, it's an Austrian artist, and he had the idea to realize this kind of eco art project, which was internationally, it was really big, recognized. Also Leonardo DiCaprio tweeted about it, but as Franziska just said, on the local level it would really negatively connotated.
So it's no, it's interesting to understand also the, how can I say, the fabric, the way to put the project in place, and also is of course the other aspect that is the international reception and the international scene, how it was seen on a larger scale, also the national one, because of course I suppose it was something that was taken as an example for the, how can I say, the heralds of the environment at an international level. So I don't know. It can be also interesting to see.
We think that the real problem of this kind of project was the location, because as you have seen in the images, I live in Austria and I live in Klagenfurt, and it's green everywhere. And people were saying, why do I have to go to the stadium? I can go for a walk and I am in the forest. So we think that probably if it was this installation that took place, I don't know, in Australia or in Texas or I don't know, somewhere else, it probably will have the type C communication in the sense of that people were confronted with this kind of thing of climate change and sustainability. But here in Austria, it was the wrong location.
Sort of rhetorical device, just something absurd that as the goal, the task of creating reflection to improve reflexivity. But who was I lost something? Who was at the origin? I don't know if you studied that anyway, of the change in the framing of the project, because in the PowerPoint she said that towards the end that I don't remember if in September or somewhere there was a change in the frame. So after that there was a sort of pacifying frame of sustainability. Who was at the beginning of the origin of this change? Do you know?
We can trace back where it started, but we know that it was strategically put. So the PR agency actually that was sponsoring or posting photos of events that were taking place in the sense or in the framework of this for forest installation, then at the end of September just came up with this kind of, oh look, actually this is an art installation against climate change, against global warming. And it was probably, we think so, that it was because there was mainly awareness for the Amazon fire at the end of September 2019. And then they had this link to say, you know, there in the Amazon there are bushfires and it's burning, and here we have how nature probably will look like if we continue in this framework.
So it's a sort of recontextualization of the strategic one, so strategic operation just to save in some sense
a little bit. That was what she, I think, what she mean when she said it was a pacifier. At the end, because as she said, the project was only about 1 month. So the beginning of October and September to October. And at the end of the project, as they have really seen that at the local level, it was really negatively debated, then they pick up, as you said, strategically this event in the Amazon, and then came up with this kind of sustainability, global change and global warming warning.
And it was done by an agency that was linked to the authors. To
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was within the team that was were realizing the project. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand it. So I don't know if there are other comments or voices about this analysis, but I don't think so. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We will wait for the paper, of course, in the International Journal of Communication. And then I don't know if David, tu es là?
Yes, I'm here.
Voilà,
I will share the PowerPoint.
Nice.
Tell me if you've got everything.
We can try to share the presentation.
Elected on March 2013, Jorge Mário Bergoglio is the first Latin American pope and makes...
This sounds good?
Yeah, quite good, yes.
It's not like a robot or...
No, it's better than before, yes.
Great.
During this period in Brazil, the presidential election took place marked by great political polarization, motivated by car washes operation and rejection of previous government, electing President Jair Bolsonaro. Representative of the victory of a program conservative, evangelical, as well as science negationists, and liberal in relation to the environment. Since the beginning of his mandate, several environment disasters have occurred, as the rupture of the Brumadinho Dam, forest fires in the Amazon, and the oil spill in the coast of northeast and southeast Brazil. Without forgetting that government summit discredited the National Institute of Space Research in relation to the deforestation that in the Amazon, which generated a strong reaction from the scientific community Brazilian. Canceled the United Nations meeting on climate change that would occur in Brazil and made harsh criticism of the Catholic Church's instance on environmental issues addressed in the encyclical. Francis, when meeting the discussion of the social process of life production, contemporary society, and its sustainability, contrasts with the social environment Brazilian government, and it is inserted in a hyper-mediated global culture condition by the increasing number of different digital resources, in which information is submitted to the condition of dramatization of everything that concerns to your ideas. It also reveals the existence of an ethical duty on the part of the Pope to raise awareness of people on these social environmental issues, and he does not just deliberate to the media communication or communication professional, but it involves an interdisciplinary effort, institutional, media, and social instance, with collaboratively demystifies these subjects, making them intelligible and to increasingly broad audiences. Regarding my image as a spokesperson for the environment, or a herald, how we will treat, we will use authors such as Morin, Turner, and Roger as a theoretical basis that evidence these characteristics in celebrities or people with high influence power. So we ask, 1. How do France's social environmental discourse relate to the political ideological bias of the current Brazilian government? 2. that in this way, through an analysis of the discourse, it is possible to distinguish the anti-environmental positioning of the Brazilian government vis-à-vis Pope Francis and his trends in the social environment field. We adopt the following assumptions. The current Brazilian government, evangelical, conservative, and denialist, for ideological political reasons. It opposes the encyclical and the Amazon synth that have a progressive character, as well as it is understood that environmental communication carried out by the Pope collaborates for the dissemination of environmental issues, amplified for its visibility in the media. Our objective is check the divergence in the speech collected to recognize and understand the controversial character according to Ruth Amosi among the government and documents prepared by the Pope. The Catholic Church, in this sense, has stood out for evangelizing work of the Pope Francis, who, with his speech in line with Franciscan dogma, bring as environmental issues a priority. We understand that Pope Francis has a role herald of the environment, and which communicated to its 1.3 billion faithful throughout the various media and heavily a digital social networks. As a theoretical foundation, in this sense, we use the concept of Olympians of Morin because, although it's not a recent concept, it is very current. And also authors like Jean-Jacques and Turner, who helped us to build in Francis' image as a celebrity. We used the analysis of the speech of Ruth Amosi, evidencing what the author calls the role of controversy, considering verbal confrontations, the principle, the influence of discourse, and the strategy of persuasion widely used by advertising and for politics. Relationships of hostility, humor, among other psychosociological situations that generate conflicts from the points of view. As well, it must present dichotomization, polarization, and disqualification of the other. As a methodological strategy, we selected statements from different members of the federal government regarding the Pope's social environmental approach, Francis, reported in the newspapers Folha de São Paulo and O Globo, which are the largest newspapers in terms of circulation and access in Brazil. We focus research among February to December 2019, a period marked by facts and discussions important in relation to the Brazilian environment and the preparation of the Amazon synth. We initially checked the news articles that contained the keyword synod and or Amazon synth through the application of the formula in the search engine Google, electronic address of the newspaper's website, month and year of publication, as well as keyword. 75 articles were found in the Folha de São Paulo newspaper and 97 articles from the newspaper O Globo. From a fluctuation rating of all of them, selected only those that broad speech from members of the current Brazilian government, from supporters and the President of the Republic himself regarding the Amazon Synod and or contests, totality 20 on articles. In the third moment, we list 4 categories of analysis referring to the environment that were commonly addressed by the government, the Laudato Si, and the report of the Amazon Synod. 1. Form of development. 2. Communities, multiculturalism. 3. Climate change. And 4. Planetary inequality. We begin by presenting the ideological policy that guides Bolsonaro's government, which is linked to 3 lines of thought. 1. Olavista, influenced by Olavo de Carvalho. 2. Neo-Pentecostal groups that, for example, try to transfer the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And 3. The pragmatic wing, formed by the military. Next are 2 examples of transcriptions collected from newspaper and their analysis. The full analysis is in the full version of the article. The first category chosen was forms of development. President Bolsonaro said, "We want everyone to be able to get to know Brazil and especially our Amazon, with all its vastness and natural beauty. It is not being devastated and neither consumed by fire, as the media learn says. Those who attack us do not are concerned with the Indian human being, but with the mineral wealth and the existing in these areas." The points addressed in the president's speech that we consider controversial when compared to the Pope's text are the way it disregards scientific data regarding care for the environment, deforestation, and fires, as well as when he believes that the interests of the both of the Synod and the questioning of the other countries are linked to the extractive interests of these governments. Pope Francis criticizes the economic development model guided by the market and focused on consumption. Exports of some raw materials to satisfy the markets of the industrialized North have produced local damage, such as contamination with mercury in gold mining or with carbon dioxide sulfur in copper. Still, what is certain is that the current world system is unsustainable. Authors who also make this critique of development are Gudinas, who makes a wide debate about what is development and its character of new extractive dependence in Latin America today, that is based on an intensive appropriation of natural resources. And Left point out that this hegemonic form of consumption and exploration of nature present important changes in the environment, lack of water, air or water contamination, reduction of forest areas, changing climate, among several, and that it is present itself as a result of organization, contemporary, economic, and social. The second category is climate change. President Bolsonaro said, "It's a fallacy to say that the Amazon is a patrimony of humanity, and a mistake as the scientists attest to affirm that the forest is the lung of the world. Using of these fallacies, one country or another, instead of helping embarked on the lies of the media and behaved disrespectfully with a colonialist spirit. They questioned that is most sacred to us, or sovereignty. We observe that Bolsonaro uses a fact already surpassed by published studies in the year 2000 that proves that the Amazon is not the lung of the world. However, does not consider the fact that this territory is important for climate regulation worldwide. With that, it tries to minimize the criticism regarding deforestation and on more. The controversy instead encompasses the Olavista ideology that sovereignty may be under threat. The bias maintained by Olavo de Carvalho tends to relativism as a way of popular approach, curiously and ironically, making the turn of criticism the hegemony of reason, while the Church of Francis seeks support in a scientific studies exposed in their documents, such as Laudato Si and the report of the Amazon Sea. As climate change is an important theme in Francis' encyclical, in his analysis, the climate is a common good and the heaviest impact of its change falls on the poorest. Climate change is a global problem with serious environmental, social, economic, distributive, and political implications, constituting one of the main challenges for humanity. For Bruno Latour, the situation is more unstable today because the planet has entered an ecological change on an unprecedented scale, what they calls the new regime climate. Anthony Giddens addresses the theme saying that the phenomenon of climate change is unique in human history. For him, the subject cannot be reduced to a debate between left or right, and the scenario is the great uncertainty and risk, and mitigation is its effect imposes on society the challenge of seeking solutions. We understand that Francis assumes a role of herald and or Olympian according to Morin, who seeks, through his image of global reach and influence with its followers, to discuss the environmental problem of the world. These include the social problems generated by the degradation of the environment and the development adopted by many countries. We observe that ideological biases, Olavista, neo-Pentecostal, and pragmatic, underway the administration of Brazil, cause inflections when compared to the integral ecology in view of the four categories listed by us: forms of development, traditional communities, climate change, and planetary inequality. Finally, we understand that, yes, heroes or heralds are important in face of this impasse. Therefore, having great influence, they can corroborate in the promotion of environmental sustainability in opposition to the inductive arguments that do not prevent and that also influence public opinion.
Nice. I think it's finished. So, okay, it was a sort of immersion, of introduction to a specific situation. This tension between two very different types of discourses. So Laudato Si, the encyclical letter by the Pope, and discourses by Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil. Personally, it was interesting, the reference to the Olympians, to the category by that was cited was interesting. I didn't know it, so it's a pity that the authors cannot speak now, because it would be interesting to discuss that a little bit, to deepen, and also some references concerning the ideological basis of the Bolsonaro regime, if I can call it like that. So in particular, the Ola Vista ideology or reference that I do not know, so it would be interesting to deepen that too. And yeah, it's anyway, we were able to listen to that. I think, Céline, that we can now end this session. I don't know if there are other comments or interventions or questions from people here, there. Thank you to the Brazilian group for this presentation. I'm very sorry, of course, for the technical problems, but we were able to listen to your presentation, and I think that it was great. Thank you very much. Goodbye.